To this next exciting chat. So in May, we commemorate Africa Month leading up to Africa Day, of course, observed on the 25th of May, on which the Organization of African Unity was founded. That serves as a precursor to the now AU. So enter Thebe Ikalafeng, who through his work places a special focus on championing made in Africa brands, promoting authentic African travel, shaping a positive narrative around the continent. And in his recently published memoir, The Traveler, Crossing Borders and Connecting Africa, he explores reclaiming and deepening his African identity, taking up space, all whilst having fun. So Thebe this morning joins us here to chat further. Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. You look amazing.
Thank you. So do you. We're blending in with our lovely continent here. Congrats on the honorary doctorates as well. I guess every day is also Africa Day for us, right? We call it home.
Every day is Africa Day for us. Every single day.
Exactly. Yeah. And so when we look at the significance of this month now, commemorating it, the impact that your work has also had, are we winning that fight? Are we claiming our agency, restoring or completing the story of the world through our version?
Not quite. And let's look at the measure. So on the 24th of May, 1963, Kwame Nkrumah gave an epic speech, Africa Must Unite. Okay. And in it he spoke about, one, the need for us to unite, the need for us to liberate, to fight for our independence, and third and most important, the need for us to drive our economic independence. Because he said that unless says political independence without economic independence means nothing. And if you look at where we are now, we still have fights around the continent. We still haven't accomplished many of the things that he spoke about already in 1963 about opening up the borders, about common African identity. You know, all the and of course, most important thing about our own defense. We still rely on the United Nations and many others. We still fail to be able to defend ourselves. So I don't think we've accomplished much. The only thing we've accomplished is political independence. And we have not really become truly free, if you will. You know, I think Sankara said, he who feeds you leads you or rules you. Yeah. And we're still being ruled by everybody else.
And so the theme for this year, and I want to get it right, justice for Africans and people of African descent through reparation. I mean, that's the whole conversation started then has to happen. If we're looking at what justice then looks like, post-1963 and beyond, even colonialization, imperialism at large.
62 years later?
Yeah.
So 62 years later, we cannot be talking about that. 62 years later, we ought to be much further than that. Yeah. We ought to be much further as a continent. We ought to be, I mean, if you look at the continent, some of the challenges, we import about $110 billion of food every year. Yet we've got about 60+% of the world's arable land here in the continent. If you look at our import-export, we import more than we export. If you look at our debt to GDP ratio, most African countries are in like the 60s or so. I mean, our debt is like at $1.8 trillion and accounting for about 25% of the GDP of the continent. Yeah. We have a problem.
Absolutely.
But I don't think that problem should be about reparations. To me, the problem should be about Africans truly owning their own agenda and Africans truly rebuilding the continent themselves, because we cannot go back to Europe and go back to America and say, pay us today. We need to rather say, we are going to pay ourselves. We are now going to determine our own rules, the way that China has done. If you look at the China-America standoff right now, China can do that because they've got the leverage. They've got the leverage to say, you used to laugh at us, you used to think that all we are was just poor workers. But they created a great vision for the continent, for their country, and they are now able to have the leverage that enables them to determine the terms of the trade.
So then language, narratives, I mean, that's an important part of this discussion then. We need to understand what that looks like in terms of agency and what we need to rewrite about ourselves as well. How do we begin to reclaim ourselves on that front? I'm asking this because in your travels, in your memoir as well, I mean, you're the view that, and there are stats to prove it, Africa No Fault is saying that 63% of people who travel Africa are from outside and they write about it. So, I mean, we're not even owning our own narrative on that front yet. Tell us a bit more about that.
We don't own our narrative. I mean, and you're so right about that. But when you talk about the culture is another one. I mean, look at us today. What do we want today? We are trying to bleach ourselves. We're trying to buy horsehair so that we can look like them. We're trying to speak like them. We're trying to perfect our accents. You know, Ngugi said it so beautifully. He says, while we were busy perfecting our accents, they were busy perfecting their access to chop at the continent and to take some of our resources. So our continent is at siege in multiple angles, in multiple areas, whether from culturally, whether economically, or whether it's politically. But those are African problems, and only Africans can deliver the African agenda. You know, in 2010, I pulled together an Africa Forum. That's 2010, that's 15 years ago.
Sure.
I pulled together a forum of very luminary thinkers in the continent, and Jane Naidu said something so amazing then. You remember he was a minister without a portfolio then, and he said, America's got an agenda for Africa, Europe has got an agenda for Africa, China's got an agenda for Africa, but Africa doesn't have an agenda for Africa. So we need to have an agenda for Africa, because until we have an agenda for Africa, until we have a clear vision for Africa, but we do have a vision. I mean, in 1963, as I said, Kwame at least laid a foundation, and the following day on the 25th, which is what we celebrate every year on Africa Day, the 32 African presidents then formed what was then the Organization of African Unity. So we had an agenda then. What we failed is what Lumumba says so well. He says Africa never finishes what it starts, and that's our big problem.
Perhaps even Mbeki, former President Thabo Mbeki, who had his I'm African speech when he took up the presidency as well. I mean, yes, there are frameworks, and then to your point about implementation. So travel then becomes important, because you can only understand and know, what's around you if you immerse yourself in it and be changed by what you're seeing. And that's what you're privy to. You mentioned that you've traveled to every country on the continent. You've been to every continent as well.
It's a statement of fact, right?
It's a statement of fact, and I just want to put that on record. So talk to us about that importance. And what do you learn when you interact with other cultures, about yourself at least, and how South Africa is perceived on the continent?
Well, I mean, to start with, when you look at us Africans, we think we've arrived if we've been to Paris and we've been to London and to Berlin and to everywhere else. And when we look at the rest of the continent, we look at the continent through the lens of the oppressors, through the lens of the colonizers, through the lens of people who look down on us. So we also then project the same negative things about the continent to ourselves. And that's why, in many ways, we have failed to appreciate who we are, to appreciate our distinctiveness and our beauty. And we seek the outside to validate us rather than to be who we are and to be proud of who we are. Travel is important, because travel helps you to understand that doesn't matter who you are and where you come from, you're just a small part of the bigger universe. And traveling in the continent is even more important, because it helps you to understand the commonalities across the continent, what binds you together as Africans. I mean, we always talk about 2,000-3,000 languages, we talk about 55, 60 African countries, we talk about all those, but at the end of the day, when you travel through the continent, as I have to everyone, you come back down and understand that what the common things among us is that we're a very resilient people, because who after 62 years of fighting for the same thing would still be standing? Other places would have fallen apart. We are very entrepreneurial people, because despite all the problems that we have in the continent, we still find a way. We make plans to survive, to thrive, to keep our dignity. And you also understand that the concept of Ubuntu in Southern Africa, or Utu in East Africa, which is what Desmond Tutu used to talk about, that because you'll see that as a common thread across the continent. Because wherever I've traveled in the continent, I've been welcomed with open hands. So you ask me the question, what do people think about South Africa? Well, South Africa, as you know, for a long time has been a mini colonial outpost. And we've also seen ourselves in what you call South African exceptionalism, instead of seeing us as part of the greater African continent. I think it's changing a lot now. You see a lot of South Africans are beginning to travel the continent, they're beginning to appreciate it, because I think there's lots of people, whether it's myself, whether it's Lerato, it's many other people who are traveling the continent, because we're now showing people the true continent, not the continent through the lens of the others.
Absolutely. And thank you for speaking to that, because I also want to look at the value chain and how we represent it. I mean, if we look at women and even just inclusion, right? Women form the backbone of the economy in many instances. I wonder what you're witnessing on that front across the continent. Even what more could be done in terms of development, supporting that infrastructure for us to restore that agency?
I mean, I shouldn't quote a Westerner to say what I'm going to say, but I think Margaret Thatcher probably did say it best when he says, if you want to know how to do anything, ask a man, but if you want to get things done, give it to a woman. What are we learning from Namibia? The new president has just arrived. as the second or third African female to be a president in the continent. She's just arrived and she's implemented some dramatic changes that we never anticipate. You know, first term already in here, some minister was found to be wanting from a moral or whatever it is, fired on the spot. Here in South Africa, what we'll be doing, we'll be talking about
commissions
stepping aside,
and omissions.
Commissions, not guilty until proven. So it's the second thing, you know, free education. He's now also implemented a reciprocity in terms of visas and all those for the Western countries. What have we done in South Africa and many other African countries? We've opened up our countries. We've opened up our homes. You know, Ubuntu is a very good principle, but it's also our undoing.
Well, Thebe, the conversation continues. The month is long. As you mentioned, every day is Africa Day for us, but we'll continue to explore that. Thank you for coming in studio and for chatting. Thebe Ikalafeng this morning, Brand Africa founder, author, weighing in, of course, as we observe Africa Month, championing Made in Africa brands. He also promotes authentic African travel and helping to shape a positive narrative around the continent at large.